everyone, Jim here. Welcome to Mystery and Mayhem. We are well into the month of May, and today I wanted to delve into a few Horror Mayhem picks. Now, Horror Mayhem is an event that was created by Scott and Becky over at the Bookish Bryants. Now, the goal is to basically read horror throughout the month of May. Now, I'm not real sure about all the details of it. I know there's a bingo card with all kinds of categories for horror that you could play this bingo card and find a suitable book to read for that category. But I just wanted to go through a few choices that I have. That of course I'm not gonna read them all, but there's a few choices that I could choose to read in the month of May once I finish reading The Terror by Dan Simmons, which I started a few days ago. And The Terror has elements of horror in it. It's basically a true almost telling of the Franklin expedition in 1845, and their goal was to explore the Northwest Passage in the Arctic, try to find the Northwest Passage, and this tells the story of two ships called the Erebus and the Terror. And basically they start out in 1845 and they become stranded in the ice up in the Arctic for pretty much 3 years, from 1845 to 1848. And it tells of their hardships and their story of survival, trying to survive the harsh elements of the Arctic. And it's horrific in that sense, because they're dealing with the cold, they're dealing with the crushing ice, they're dealing with poisoned canned food because the canning wasn't done properly, so they're basically starving to death on these two ships. And they're running out of coal, they're running out of any kind of fuel for heat. And if that wasn't horrific enough, there's a creature on the ice that is hunting the men on both ships and killing them. And this creature they think is a polar bear, but it might not be a polar bear. So there are definite elements of horror in this book, and it's a big book. My copy has something like 700 something pages, and I'm enjoying it very, very much. I'm trying to get through it so I can get to some, more traditional horror stories for Horror Mayhem, but this book is just incredible. Very, very well written by Dan Simmons, very highly recommended. Like I said, it's a very big book, but I'm tearing through it. The chapters are fairly short, so I should have it done hopefully in a day or two, and then I can get into some other more traditional horror. So I'm going to share some of those with you. And as I said, I've got a lot of books here. I'm just going to show them to you, and I haven't really decided which one I'm going to read yet after I finish The Terror. But maybe once I show you guys, you can, let me know in the comments which one you think I should read once I'm done The Terror. A lot of them are just short stories. I think maybe Horror Mayhem said something about, it's for reading shorter horror fiction under 250 pages, but I'm not too sure, again, about those details. I could probably put more links below, and you can find out more about those details. So I'm going to start with a favorite author of mine, Fritz Leiber. Now, he was a very prolific author. He was known for writing horror and fantasy and science fiction, and this one is a short story collection, The Book of Fritz Leiber by Daw Books. Now I'm going to go through these fairly quick because I've got a few here to show you, but that lovely cover, and that's full of a lot of his horror stories. And it's got some very, and it's some of his fantasy stories too, because I think that's a Fafford and a Grey Mouser drawing inside. So let's see what we have here. Yeah, a story called The Spider, A Hitch in Space, Kindergarten, When the Last Gods Die, Beauty and the Beast, Cat's Cradle. Yeah, so that's a nice little paperback. I love Fritz Leiber. And this one, I think I've shown it before, called Night Monsters. And this one is all horror in this one. And just look at that awesome cover. And this has The Black Gondolier, Midnight in the Mirror World, I'm Looking for Jeff, The Creature from Cleveland Depths, The Girl with the Hungry Eyes, etc., etc. So that's always an option. Then we have this collection of stories called You're All Alone. And I think I might have featured this in another video. You're All Alone is just an awesome story that kind of predates the movie Matrix, but Matrix used a lot of the elements, I think, from Fritz Leiber's story. For you to really get what I'm talking about, you'll have to read this story. But it's very reminiscent of the Matrix movie, and I still think that that's where they might have got the idea for their movie from Leiber's brilliant short story, You're All Alone. A very creepy, very, very creepy story. And then there's a famous book of his, Fritz Leiber, called Conjure Wife, which was made into a movie, I think, in the 80s, but very, very good story. And Fritz Leiber's highly recommended. Let's stick to small paperbacks for now. This book, I bought this book brand new off the shelves when I must have been 16 years old. I think it was written in 1980, called Night Boat by Robert R. McCammon. And of course, what attracted me was that awesome cover with undead Nazis on it. And I remember reading it and really enjoying this book. And, it's still in perfect shape. I like, if I buy a book brand new, I tend to keep it in fairly good shape. I mean, if there's books here that are kind of beat up and not looking too good, I've usually bought them used. So this is a very cool book, and I'm almost tempted for this to be my read, because it's been years since I've read it, and I remember loving this, and it's got undead Nazis. I mean, you can't go wrong with undead Nazis, I'm just saying, for horror. So that might be an option. Now, this very famous story called The King in Yellow by Robert W. Chambers. And again, just, that's when they just did awesome covers back in the day. And this is an ace paperback in really good shape. And, yeah, that might be worth a consideration for Horror Mayhem. Now, this is, we're getting into, I think, short story anthologies now. This one is called Vamps, and it's obviously like what it sounds. It's short stories about female vampires, ladies of the night, called vampires, deadly ladies of the night, vampires, and it's full of short stories, and I'm sure it's got Carmilla in here, if I remember correctly. Maybe not in this one. Yes, Carmilla by Sheridan Le Fanu. It's got a story by Kenneth Lee, Red as Blood. Yeah, The Drifting Snow by August Derleth. For the Blood is the Life by F. Marion Crawford. She Only Goes Out at Night by William Tenn. There's all kinds of... The Girl with the Hungry Eyes by Fritz Leiber again. Just, yeah, some great stories in that. Big anthology. And that's always fun. Like, I love short stories, and I'm always up for reading them. Now we've got a couple of examples of erotic horror. And this is called Hotter Blood, More Tales of Erotic Horror. And these are short horror stories with an erotic element, obviously, in really good shape. And it's got stories in here by Richard Lehman, Lisa W. Cantrell, Stephen Gresham, Carl Edward Wagner, Nancy A. Collins, and that's just like look at that awesome cover. I'm trying not to get my ring light on there. Just, yeah, so that's an option. And then there's this one called I Shudder at Your Touch. And it's got stories in here by Stephen King, Ruth Rendell, Clive Barker, Stephen Donaldson, etc., etc. And I think that's... I forget the name of that artist, but he did a lot of Elric of Melibide covers for Michael Moorcock, and that's just an awesome Awesome drawing. I love that. And again, it's a pretty hefty anthology. There's a lot of good short stories in there. Now, we get into some older paperbacks. These are oldies I've had on my shelf, and I've got more around, but I didn't want to grab them all. This one is called Beyond the Curtain of Dark, edited by Peter Haining, who's a famous anthologist. And Masterpieces of Horror, it's called. And it's got stories in here by Robert Bloch, Patricia Highsmith, Ambrose Bierce, Ray Bradbury. I love Ray Bradbury. Edgar Allan Poe, Frederick Brown, who's just an awesome writer. If you've never read Frederick Brown, he's fantastic. Henry Kuttner, F. Marion Crawford, and another one by Sheridan Le Fanu, The Fortunes of Sir Robert Ardagh. So yeah, Isaac Asimov, Robert Bloch. There's a lot of stories in that one. So, you know, who knows, maybe I'll just read some short stories in an anthology for Horror Mayhem. We'll see. This one is called The Screaming Skull and Other Great American Ghost Stories. Look at that cover. Edited by David G. Hartwell. And, you know, a lot of these anthologies will have the same stories from other anthologies because they're famous stories. So, F. Marion Crawford, Nathaniel Hawthorne. Yeah. John Kendrick Bangs. So that's one. And this one I'm glad I have is a Christopher Lee from the Archives of Evil. And apparently he had a hand in choosing the stories in this slim paperback. But there he is on the cover. Edited by Christopher Lee and Michael Perry. And this one has The Spider, which we saw in another anthology, I, the Vampire by Henry Kuttner. There's a Robert Bloch story, Basil Copper. Now, a lot of these I've read already because when I bought them, I read a lot of these stories already. But, I mean, they're always worth a reread. It's got Robert E. Howard's story in here, The Black Stone, which is a Lovecraftian kind of thing. Kind of story on his part. The Judge's House by Bram Stoker, which is a very good eerie story. Okay, some bigger anthologies. I've got this one, and it's The Mammoth Book of Monsters, edited by Stephen Jones, with that creepy cover on it. And it's got a lot of stories in here. Kind of a neat little drawing. I love these Mammoth books. They're just great things to have, you know. And it's got tons of stories in here. Clive Barker, Robert E. Howard, The Horror from the Mound, Kenneth Lee, The Hill, Joe R. Lansdale, Carl Edward Wagner. Yeah, so that's again worth a read. And this one is just humongous. I bought this used a short while ago. I don't think I've ever shown it on the channel. Look how big it is. Great Horror Stories. And these are older ones. This was printed, let's see what it says here. I think it said printed before. Well, it was originally printed in 1936. So all these stories in this book are pre-1936, and this was reprinted in 1990. Oh no, this one's a 2002. So it's got stories by Wilkie Collins, Nathaniel Hawthorne, Washington Irving, Edgar Allan Poe. Hugh Walpole has a story in here. Who did I just see that did? Roy Reads Anything just did. Featured Hugh Walpole on his channel, I think, just yesterday, if I'm not mistaken. There's a story in here by GDH and M. Cole, who I just read a short story of theirs in Lady on the Case that I showed in one of my prior videos. So that's interesting. There's tons of stories in here. Daniel Defoe. Charles Dickens has a story in here, and some of these look like they're mysteries and not necessarily horror. So there's an Old Man in the Corner story by Baroness Orczy. So I guess these kind of blur the line between horror and mystery in this, but that's just just a awesome book to have, and I mean, that'll be fun. And of course, there's the old standby, Edgar Allan Poe. I've showed this before. One of my favorite books in my collection. And the artwork is by Ricey Lonette, and I love that pen and ink kind of style, and it's just a complete Edgar Allan Poe. It's just a beautiful book to have up on the shelf, and Edgar Allan Poe is a perfect read for Horror Mayhem. And I've got one more, and this is kind of a non-fiction one, In Search of Dracula by Raymond T. McNally and Radu Florescu. And it talks about all aspects of the character and the real person Dracula in here. It's a history of the movies, of Bram Stoker, of the actual Vlad Tepes, and it's got all kinds of photos in here of Castle Dracula. Let me see if I can find a decent one for you. The Castle Dracula Hotel. There's a statue of Dracula, Vlad Tepes, in Romania, and it goes into talks about the movies as well. There's Bela Lugosi as Dracula. So yeah, I got this book years and years ago, and I really enjoyed it. And if you're into Dracula and the whole history and the mythology of the character and of the real person and the movies, stories, this is well worth picking up. And that cover is just awesome. That cover's by Edward Gorey. And again, it's got that lovely, scratchy pen and ink style that I love so much. So yeah, that's all I wanted to talk to you about today. Just, get caught up a little bit on Horror Mayhem. And pretty soon I will have a special announcement in maybe another week or two. So I hope you guys stay tuned for that. And I hope you enjoyed today's episode. You guys take care. Be well. I'll talk to you soon. Keep reading.